Save, which is um, today's discussion will be based on the book All We Can Save, which is a groundbreaking anthology edited by Ayana Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine K. Wilkinson. It addresses the urgent need for collective action on climate change. Just to let you guys know, this discussion is recorded. You're welcome to ask questions either on camera or over chat. So on to our panelists. So the first panelist is Monica Chen. She is the executive director of New Roots Institute. It's a national nonprofit dedicated to empowering the next generation with knowledge and training to end factory farming. Just a second. For some reason I'm having a little technical glitch over here, so just hang on.
Sorry, was that my introduction to start speaking?
Monica,
Sorry?
go ahead. Go ahead, Monica.
Okay. Monica, go ahead. Actually, why don't you just go ahead and start? Oh yeah, let me introduce the others as well. I'm good now. So Heather, why is this glitching on me now? Okay, Monica, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming when I know it's the Super Bowl and other things are happening in the world, all of which might prevent you from being here. My name is Monica Chen, and I grew up in Silicon Valley, in Sunnyvale specifically. And it's really an honor to be a part of this because these are the libraries that I grew up going to and helped to shape who I am today. I've been asked to talk a little bit about how effective education is being utilized to raise awareness about climate change and promote environmentally conscious behaviors among communities and future generations. And when we think about threats to the environment, we tend to picture, at least in the San Francisco Bay Area, oil spills, or we think about the Chevron refinery or the Shell refinery in Martinez. And the truth is that our food system poses one of the biggest threats to the environment. And when I'm speaking to students, it's become very clear that when we talk about climate change, it's not something that seems far away anymore. It seems very specific. I can go to a high school or a college in the San Francisco Bay Area, and students are noticing that the air quality is not always great, and that not everybody lives in homes and not everybody has jobs where they have air purifiers. So they actually do have something concrete to understand environmental injustice or environmental racism. It's not this far thing away across the Pacific Ocean. This is impacting us now, and certainly relating climate change to the individual students that we're speaking to is really important. The challenge, as we'll see during my brief presentation, is that we don't want folks to feel immobilized by the enormity of this challenge. So this is a slide that I sometimes use that really illustrates how animal agriculture is related to all these different issues, which gives me the ability to go into high schools and colleges. And this is not just in the San Francisco Bay Area, but actually across the United States with my team of about 20. And we're able to go into health classes. I can go into 9th grade health class and talk about nutrition and zoonotic diseases. I can go into an environmental science class and talk about greenhouse gas emissions. I can go into an MBA class and talk about the impacts of horizontal and vertical integration and how that impacts farmers and workers. So what's really wonderful about this particular topic is that it does connect to so many different subject areas. And on the subject of climate change, I am reminded of Project Drawdown, where climate activist Paul Hawken and his team listed the top 100 solutions to addressing climate change, and 2 of the top 5 do relate to food. So food is really an area where we can affect change, and that's so important for us. I said earlier that we can't be immobilized by the sheer awfulness of what we're learning about. We need to know that there's some action. The number one solution is addressing refrigerant management, which the average 14-year-old can't really do a whole lot about. Even me, I can't do a whole lot about refrigerant management as an individual, but I can, and so can all of you, address our food system. So my nonprofit has worked with almost 300,000 students in the United States since we were founded actually by a student herself, just after graduating from UC Berkeley. We've delivered over 10,000 high school and college lessons. And if you know of a class that might be interested in having us or know some teachers, please do connect me. And most importantly, we've also trained youth from our lessons in leadership and how to create change within their schools and within their communities, because we're trying to address change on an individual and institutional and a systemic level. This is an example of an outline that I might share with students. This would be for maybe a ninth grade environmental or health class. And, again, we can go up all the way through grad school. What I really like about this is that we're able to, again, touch on these different subjects. It leads to taking action. It begins with understanding what factory farming is, just so that we're all on the same page. This topic is by its nature disturbing. So there's sometimes disturbing content, but we're really mindful. We don't show gory photos or videos. The goal of our lessons is not to just oppress people, but to actually make people feel more empowered. And I would argue that for a lot of our students, and even some of you in the audience, you need to feel empowered. You need to feel like you're part of something bigger. So I'm just going to go through like the first 4 slides of what I might include in factory farming basics. So this is where I'd appreciate some participation in the chat. How many of you sang Old MacDonald when you were kids? Can you just put yes or no? I've never heard that song. Like, yes, I know the song Old MacDonald. No, I have no idea what you're talking about, Monica. All right. So 2 folks have heard the song Old MacDonald. Okay, more are. Thank you so much. I appreciate the participation. So I grew up in Sunnyvale. I remember singing that song. I remember driving along Highway 280 and seeing cows on the side of the road and being like, everything is lovely. And then when I went to a grocery store, this is the kind of image that I would see, like rolling green hills. But that's not what farming is actually like anymore. What we have instead are concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. It's the practice of keeping thousands of animals in confinement, often for their whole lives. And this is done to produce the most product for the most profit. And this does have some implications. But first of all, continuing in our meeting chat, I want to ask you how many land animals you think are killed for meat, dairy, and eggs every single year in the United States. So I'm looking for a number, any number at all from folks. What can you give me in the chat? 8 million. Thank you so much, Heather, for your participation. All right, 1 billion. Let's keep in mind that there's over 300 million people living in the United States, right? And those 300 million people, are they eating animal products once a week, every day, 3 times a day? And when you do that multiplication, it actually is huge. It's even more than 1 billion. It's 10 billion, right? That's more than the entire human population. In the whole world, it's about 70 billion. So the US, with its much smaller population, is having a pretty large impact when it comes to animal agriculture. We're consuming a lot of animal products. And as someone who came from immigrants, I can tell you that coming into this country, my family started to consume a lot more animal products. And there's a lot that we can discuss culturally around that. Okay, so my next question is, of those 10 billion animals, what percentage do you think are raised on factory farms? So I'm looking for a percentage between 0 and 100. What percentage do you think? 50%, 90%? The answer is 99%. And really, that's why I do this work, because 99% of the time, which is virtually all the time, when you go to a grocery store, when you go to a restaurant, it's coming from these factory farms. And this isn't broken down by animal. All right, skipping ahead to what I might do in a lesson when we get into the solutions, it's really important for the students to think about what power we have, what actions we can take as individuals to improve the system, what actions we can take on a systemic societal level, which I'd love to actually do with you all, but I'm cognizant of time. We're talking about the obstacles, and this includes many things: culture, as I was relating to earlier, taste, access, all of the things that are discussed in the book. And then really big questions around how do we overcome these obstacles as individuals and as a society. And the actual discussion is really, really productive. I'm happy to share that students are able to think very critically about how to address these issues. And I'd love to do that with all of you at some point as well. So in our work, we are recruiting fellows to work on campaigns within their schools. I wanted to mention one of the quotes from the book, All We Can Save, in one of the first chapters. one of the students in that chapter wrote that the Western media created a narrative that the youth movement started in Europe with Greta Thunberg, and that there are really youth of color all over the world who are working on this. And I wanted to echo that. I wanted to really reinforce that it's important for us to uplift these stories. One of my UCLA students was telling me recently that she felt like if her life was not equal to the significance of Martin Luther King, that she didn't feel like her life was worth living, like that it would be impactful. And I've been sitting with that as like a little 20-year-old to feel like if you're not Martin Luther King, then there is no point. And that made me feel really sad because there are so many people who made Martin Luther King able to do what he did. And there's so many people before Martin Luther King and after Martin Luther King who have not had their stories told. And that is, I think, one of the values of this book. I wanted to really share a poem that our students wrote together. This was not something that I instigated, and I think it's really relevant to the message that I'm trying to share today around empowerment and not feeling immobilized. So this is called Only One Voice.
I am only one voice, tiny, timid, trembling.
I am only one voice. Nobody would hear me.
I am only one voice. I won't be understood.
I am only one voice, and the problem is overwhelming.
I am only one voice, often neglected.
I am only one voice, a little speck in the big world.
I'm only one voice. What difference? I am only one voice.
But I am not alone.
I'm only one voice. One voice is always start.
I am only one voice, but my voice matters.
I am only one voice.
I will speak louder.
I am only one voice. I will make them listen.
I am only one voice, but we only have one planet.
We are one voice, no longer two.
We are one voice, no longer timid.
We are one voice, sometimes still trembling.
I am only one voice.
Amplifying others you choose not to hear. I am only one voice.
Trying to save our one planet.
I am only one voice.
No longer alone.
I am only one voice.
Wow, that's powerful.
Thank you. Okay. So I hope that you all can remember that you're only one voice, but that there are other folks doing this work with you. And I hope that when you see our students, you don't just think to yourself, wow, those are some inspiring students, and then do nothing. Really, what I hope you hear in these stories is that there's something going on and that you should be a part of it, and that inspiration is actually very motivating to you. And one other thing that I want to note that is really important in effective education is the knowledge that each of us is part of something a whole lot bigger. Like, yes, our individual lives matter, but we have a lot of ancestors and folks that will come after us. And what we're really needing is social change, not one quick technological fix, although I respect technology. But we are a part of a movement that will take generations, and it is up to each of us to play our part. And you're not alone in caring, and you are a part of a community. And if anybody would like to join our community, you're very welcome to reach out to me. This is my email that I'll put in the chat. It's monica@newrootsinstitute.org. And that is my
Perfect.
site. Thank you so much.
So, Monica, there's actually a question for you. The question is, how many youth groups do you think there are in the US?
Heather, what do you mean? Because do you mean like church youth groups, like 4-H?
That are working on climate, that are specifically working on climate and possibly specifically what you're doing with the food?
Oh gosh, there's so many. And, you have to keep in mind that some are just happening at a very small community level. Some of them are part of larger networks like New Roots Institute. But off the top of my head, I could probably list over 20. I'm sure that there's hundreds.
Okay,
Thank you.
Moving on to our next panelist. Our next panelist is Mansi Shah. She is a technologist with 15 plus years of experience in enterprise products. She's committed to applying technology to fighting climate change. So she will be addressing the question, what initiatives are being implemented to accelerate the transition to renewable energy sources and to enhance energy efficiency. Mansi, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this panel and giving me the chance to read this book, which I wouldn't have otherwise. It was really, really lovely. So I'm going to take a very technology-centric view towards the question of energy efficiency, and renewables. And that's because that's where I come from, but that's the beauty about, I think, working on climate change. We need voices from every single field to come together to solve this problem. There's not one single way that we are going to be able to tackle this. So before sort of talking about the renewables, I want to try and sort of dissect this problem and try and sort of show that this is not just about reducing the emissions that we get from our power plants. That is only one part of the entire picture. Here, what I have is 5 key sectors that are the biggest GHG emitters that we have in the world. And I have some numbers for world percentages, for US percentages, and specifically for California as to what each of these sectors end up contributing to the greenhouse gases. And if you see 4 out of these 5 actually industries, electricity generation, transport, and building, 4 out of these 5 end up generating most of their emissions by burning fossil fuels today. For example, industries like steel and cement, these guys need very high temperature heat, and those processes need the way they generate that high temperature heat is by burning fossil fuels. Electricity, though we have transitioned off majoritarily, at least in California, we are at 60% renewable. Even then, we do get 40% of our electricity today from fossil fuel based power plants. Agriculture, I'll leave out because that's not fossil fuel based. That's just methane coming from your crops and animals, and something similar to what Monica was also referring to. Transport is, again, we are burning fossil fuels today to do passenger cars, heavy duty trucks, shipping, air cargo and air passenger travel. All of that is coming from burning fossil fuels. And there's a reason I'm going into this. When you ask me about renewable, just electricity, there's a reason I'm talking about all of these. Lastly, the sector that's kind of overlooked by a lot of people commonly is buildings, where actually a lot of natural gas gets used for heating and cooling purposes. Water, space, food, all of these 3 end up having a lot of natural gas in their heating and cooling processes in buildings. And when we talk about transitioning to renewables, it's not just about reducing the emissions coming from just the pure electricity generation, but it is a multi-pronged approach. We need to first think about electrifying these other sectors that are deeply fossil fuel based. So the way to think about this is, actually, I have a slide which talks about that 3-pronged approach. So the way to think about this is, first, we need to start thinking about how are we going to electrify all of these processes. For the sake of this audience, maybe we can leave industries out because that's a much larger commercial problem to tackle. But even at residential scale, how are we going to electrify all of the things that we today do not have electrified? And the reason to electrify is not because today our grid is completely clean. That's not, so a lot of people say this to me, like, why should I buy an EV? The electricity is still coming from natural gas. No, that's not how you think about it. First of all, an EV is the combustion engine is only about 25% efficient, whereas a natural gas power plant is still 50% efficient. So right there, I can sort of explain why to buy an EV. But the reason to electrify is because we are going to have to all of our comfort, all of our well-being, in some sense, is being fueled by a source of energy. And we want to transition to a source of energy that centrally can be transitioned away from fossil fuels to a renewable green source of energy. It's just about where to solve the problem. Like in software, we don't try and solve the problem in 10, 8 different places, but we try and centralize it and try and solve it in one place. That's my mental model for why to electrify. But it's not just about electrifying. It's also then the grid infrastructure needs to be able to support that much load. Once we transition away from natural gas and do all our heating and cooling using electricity, start charging all our cars, and all our miles come from electric electrons, then the grid that supplies to us also needs to be able to hold up to that load. And then the third part of this is, where is the supply coming from? How are we going to source so much green electricity? So those are the three sort of pieces of this puzzle. And I'm going to try and talk a little bit more about California to keep the problem contained. But most of this also applies to other parts of the world. So what can we do as residential consumers to try and help with electrification? First, we need to monitor. We need to know where, so there are audits available. You can yourself put in smart meters. There is a lot of actually startups in the Valley right now that are working on this. So first, you monitor where you're spending your energy. Then you try and improve your insulation. These are the basic things. Become energy efficient by getting better appliances, or at least making sure the ones you have are in good health. Then you talk about electrifying your heating, cooling, cooking, all of the things that most likely today may or may not be electrified. Heat pumps is a really great example of an extremely efficient way of doing both heating and cooling, where it's actually using the energy right out of your atmosphere to try and help, almost 80% more efficient than a regular heater for doing heating and cooling both. And then, like I said, transition to EVs. It is a process. None of this can be done immediately. This is not happening overnight. This is a process that we all need to start thinking about, planning towards. There is a lot of help that, at least in California, that is available. There are zero interest in financing available to do these kinds of improvements. For lower income households, there's actually free services that will they'll do both audit and do the improvements for you. I have this link here, climateaction.ca.gov. If you go there, there's a list of different things that you may qualify for, which you can find out if one of those you qualify for, and get some rebates, get some subsidies, get some zero interest loans. All of this is possible, but we need to collectively start working towards this. That's the only actionable thing in our hands. And collective action is the only answer. Besides that, when we talk about infrastructure improvements, there's two pieces to this. There is the grid improvement that California is already doing. California is actually adding almost 86 gigawatts. That's 3 times of its current capacity to the grid. So they're doing their part. Whether they'll deliver in time for all of this, we have to wait and watch, but the plan is there. Then the EV infrastructure, again, lots of public financing, private financing, lots of VC funding going into these EV infrastructure businesses. One way to think about this, like, as I was just saying, I realized if we just tackle this non-capitalistically, if we just look at this from a socialistic point of view, saying this is to save our planet, we need to save our planet, that's how I came to this. But for any real global transition to happen, having some commercial upside is actually always beneficial. And that's what these startups, the VC funding, they've all realized this. There's actually a huge commercial upside in investing in these efforts, in investing in smart grids, in AI-based grid efficiencies, in doing smart meters, in all of these, and EVs, of course. I mean, Tesla stock is probably making more money for people here in the Valley. So it's not one or the other. We don't have to look at this and say that, I am going to have to suffer to help my planet. We are not helping our planet, we are helping ourselves. The planet's going to be fine. It's us who's going to be in trouble. But it's not one or the other. We can do both, and there is a huge commercial upside. And also, there's lots of jobs right now in climate. So if one of you listening right now is interested, please hit me up. I can introduce you to some of these startups. But lastly, the clean energy is what is the third prong of this. This is something that will really have to be driven by the state. There is a lot of work happening. The target right now is by 2045, 100% of the energy sourced by every single utility is going to have to be clean, renewable energy. So think about it. If we all transition and electrify all our devices, and the utilities like PG&E are forced to have 100% renewable energy, that together is what solves the problem. One or the other can't solve it. So that's sort of my view on where we are going. Lastly, I just want to touch upon this because I spoke a lot about California, and it almost sounds like California is on track and doing well, and we are an example of how to do this right. And the reason we are an example is we are a rich state. We have ridden the Industrial Revolution train, we have gained off it, and hence California today happens to be one of the richer, more capable states. But if we think about, say, the global South, or this probably applies to any minority community right now, they are just getting on this journey of improving their life. They are going to need this energy to improve their lifestyle, to get to where everyone else is. I say we in a more, US Western way, we had a guilt-free 100 years to reap the benefits of fossil fuel because no one knew about climate change. It's not because there was any evil, it's just no one knew about it. And now today, when those other countries or those other communities are trying to uplift themselves, we can't put an additional burden of climate change on them. And plus, we need to, it is our duty to help them. That's the only way this is going to be done. We are in this together. Just if California fixes its situation and 3 other countries in Asia don't, the floods in San Diego aren't going away. There is no us against them here. It's all us. We all need to be doing this together. And yeah, we, as the Western countries, the more affluent capitalist countries, it is our duty to do our part. And that's where sort of carbon credits come in, but I'm not going to talk about that. But yeah, so that is my take on energy and electricity.
That's amazing, Mansi. That was very enlightening. I learned quite a bit from you.
Thank you. That was the hope that, oh, there is questions. Other questions? No.
That was really good. Can you hear me? I put a resource in the chat called Decent Living Energy. For our 200th show, we had some folks that work with climate in the UN. And there's a gentleman that's a Yale University professor who started a nonprofit that believes if poverty went away, there would be no problem with climate. So the decentlivingenergy.org is his website. He's originally from India. He's a Yale University professor. Really interesting. I won't get into it, but that's there for people for that resource, which is an interesting take on if everybody had equal access to energy, food, right?
Yeah.
There'd be no.
And this is a perfect segue because the person who's speaking right now is our next panelist. She's Heather Durham. She launched Silicon Valley's Technology, Art, Green, and Sustainability. Do you call it SV tags? Heather?
We do, yeah, we do call it SV tags. And I wasn't going to read this, but I'm going to go ahead and read our mission statement, which is our mission is to share information about companies, nonprofit, people, places concerning technology, art, green, and sustainability tags. The intention is to foster growth and learning in the tags area of interest concerning people and industries, connecting them with resources and people. And that being said, in 2020, I bought Tags USA so we could take the show to other states. We have 20 stations we air on here, public stations. Massachusetts alone has 600 public stations. Each state varies on how many they have. And we were ready to post in 3 stations there, and then COVID hit. And as I was saying before we open this up to everybody, I have an 88-year-old mother with me who was concerned for her health with traveling, so I wasn't traveling, and then my fiance. So that's kind of the segue, and I can tell more about why I came up with it. But for some of you that don't know, I was on 5 boards one year. The U.S. Green Building Council was one of those boards. I helped to create the programs from 2009 to 2013 until I left that board. So one of the questions you guys gave me was what measures are being taken to reduce waste, promote recycling, and reuse materials as part of the climate change mitigation. That was part A of it. I broke it up into 2 things. And of course, the biggest thing we can do is, save money, conserving natural resources, reducing greenhouse gas emission, practicing the 3 R's, which is something I always say at the end of our show: reduce, reuse, recycle. And I'm going off my little thing here, but one of the really interesting things, one of the speakers was a former model talking about fashion and how it's a huge waste that you buy new clothes and within 2 to 3 years, those clothes are in the garbage, the garbage recycle landfill. So reusing and buying things from thrift stores or not putting things in the trash. And to me, it doesn't even make sense that people would put things into trash, because we've always donated things in our family, but there's people out there that throw things in the trash bin, and it's a huge, huge waste. So anyway, that's one of the things. So there was somebody that had, I think it was 400 model mafia, and she went into that on the book. I'm not going to go into it because people can read about it. They can go to audio notes. It's really fascinating and interesting how much water and energy and things take to produce clothing. So at home, that's one of the biggest things we can do. Also, I'm not sure if a lot of you guys have heard of Recology and their big recycling program with artists. I had them on the show several years ago. People from around the world actually come to the Bay Area to learn about their program. It's been going on probably 25, 30 years. They have a vetted art program where they allow, I think it's about 6 artists a year. It may have changed during the pandemic. But there's people wanting to get in the program because they get to go to the dump and use things to make art. That being said, dumps from all over the world, garbage, recycling, they come here to learn that program so they can take it back there. So they're having less stuff going into the landfill, which is a pretty cool program that started here, and around the world, people have now replicated that. So I just wanted to share that. And I'm looking into the ring and now I can't see. So the other part to that question was efforts to minimize environmental degradation. And I had to actually think about that and look it up. I've been doing this a long time. I started producing the show 15 years ago, 2009, January. We aired our first show in March 2009. And so I'm just going to read this, because environmental degradation is the deterioration of the environment through depletion of resources as a quality of air, water, soil, deconstruction of ecosystems, habitat destruction, extinction of wildlife, and pollution. Taking a breath. That's a lot. We covered that in this book. And for anybody that hasn't read the book that's on this, do the audio notes, read it. It is a very long book. Some of it's really hard to swallow. I was actually crying in part of the book because it is really hard to hear some of the things in the book, but it's a reality that we have to face, and we can do what we can do, right? And I started the TV show so I could do things about different things that are happening around tech, art, green, and sustainability. So in the book, there was many companies that were working on this. And one of the things on there was the natural sequencing of farming. You can look it up on Wikipedia or go to the book. The Climate Victory Garden was one of the things I thought was interesting. Of course, the Natural Resource Defense Council, we've had them on the show. Earth Justice, UN Climate Group. So these are some of the it kind of goes with the next question that you asked me to do too. This wasn't in there, but it was mentioned in About the Readers, Fire Drill Fridays that Jane Fonda started. I thought that was kind of interesting. Creating a local group or a podcast or a TV show like I did on your local public access. There's well, I'm not sure if this is the numbers now, but when I went to the National Association of Broadcasters last year, there was over 110,000 podcasts around the world. So there's a lot of podcasts out there. There's a lot of noise. There's some that are already there. So finding out the ones that are working on what you're interested in, trying to work with them, volunteer, or even try to get on them to talk about whatever your group does is a way to go. You know, creating a media list with people who are working on it already in media. There's a lot of people in the book that are doing that. One of those podcasts was How to Survive in the World. Octavia was one of the not authors, but she was the like sub-authors that one of her stories was in there. It was really interesting. She actually has 2 podcasts, but that one was kind of interesting to this group. Another one was the author like this, let's see, sorry, I'm getting lost here. Naomi Klein, she was one of the guest authors and of the book, and she had like this one and the other ones, everything, this is Everything That We Can Change, I think was the name of the book. Regenerative farming and green wave was one of the resources on there that was really interesting. I was saying right before we jumped on this that I was really inspired by the story in Puerto Rico by Christine E. Neves Rodriguez, that she was from Puerto Rico, moved here, went to school. She started her own TV show. She taught at Yale. She moved back to Puerto Rico right before the huge hurricane. And then everything shut down. And she started a food collaborative or co-op, I guess, out of her laundry room to help feed people during the hurricane. So, you know, it starts at community and then goes out. So do what you can do, right? And then how to educate people was the other question. Again, our show, we've produced 200 shows, 210 shows so far. Like I said, there was a gentleman from Yale University who started his own thing about poverty and climate. And if we heal poverty, that there will be no problems with climate. And that's a debate in itself. But it's called decentlivingenergy.org. There's hundreds of organizations around the US and around the world that are working on getting, you know, the problem out there, getting solutions. This book has a really good resources. I had 2 large clients that I was in marketing consulting when I started the TV show. One of them was a nanotech company and one of them was a cancer research company. And a long story why I started it, but I had the nanotechnology glass company posted in Sunset magazine. And I had a marketing degree, a journalism degree, double major, never thought in a million years I would start a TV show. But those 3 people, the architect, builder, designer, weren't sharing new information with each other. And that kind of set with me weird in 2006. Inconvenient truth just came out. Greenwashing was a new word. That's when I came up with tags. And so again, you could do your own thing or you can join some of these organizations. 350.org has a local group, Sierra Club, Climate Action Group, Center for Cultural Power was one of the groups that was mentioned in the book, which I haven't investigated if they're local, but I think they were Chicago, if I remember off the top of my head. Again, great US Green Building Council, which does LEED certification for commercial buildings. They also used to have a home program. One of the local ones is Rebuild. I think it's called Rebuild Silicon Valley. Greener Build, not sure if they're still around. Earth Uprising was founded by a teenager. She was in the book, talked about what her thing, what she does, and how she's moved forward in helping with climate. Sarah Stillman was also an investigative journalist. There were several of them in the book. So again, there's many things you could do. Biomimicry, also something that I heard about way back in the USGBC, but kind of forgot about. And as we live in a really old house downtown San Jose where the power went out, then it came back, and then some things came back. It's something to think about as you may be remodeling your own home or looking at commercial buildings, to look at nature and how it is creating things naturally is a way that we should be thinking about how we live and how our home is, you know, architecturally done. Climate waste reduction program, that's another one that was mentioned. There's a bunch of programs with that: organic grant programs, recycle fabric, plastic, light glass. Those are things you can look at. Greenhouse gas reduction with loan programs, use grant programs, community composting. There's so many programs out there, and there's a bunch of them locally too, but I won't get into it. I'm not sure. Did I just blab on for 10 minutes? And I think that's my time. So any questions, just ask. And that was
I
kind
have
of
a
my
couple of
take on it.
questions, Heather,
Sure.
actually. So all the resources that you mentioned, is there some way to access those resources?
I'll put them in a document and send them on so that you can post it.
Okay, that's great. And also all your shows are online, right?
So we started with the local TV show a TV station, Create TV. I'm the producer. I'm responsible for getting guests, for the funding, creating the content. In 2019, December, right before everything shut down, they were hacked and our shows were pulled off the web. One of my interns posted some things on YouTube. So there's some things that have the half-hour show. There's some things that have 10 minutes. Again, it's up to me as the producer founder to post everything. So we will be adding things to YouTube. There's some things on there. And then the TV station, which is Create TV, sj.org, they do have some of the newer back copies on there. The climate one, which is actually a 2-part show. So it's a hour show with 4 people that have worked with the UN. That is on there. And I'll make sure that I get that on our website and link to YouTube very soon as well.
Perfect. So if there aren't any more questions for Heather, we can move on to our next panelist, who's Kavita Lee. Kavita is the Director of Business Operations at Activate, an organization that helps early stage climate scientists bring their products to the market. She will be addressing the question about innovation and technology being leveraged to promote regenerative agricultural practices aimed at enhancing soil health and emissions, particularly through initiatives such as carbon capture and storage. So over to you, Kavita.
Thanks so much for having me. So I am the Director of Business Operations for Activate. We help scientists who are finishing their PhD or postdoc programs who have developed hard tech products in their labs, bring them to market. And in particular, we have a lot of scientists who are trying to become entrepreneurs working in the regenerative agriculture space. So just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about or reminding folks what is regenerative agriculture, and then highlight some of the female-founded companies that we're quite proud of that are supporting agriculture in a variety of different ways, and then maybe a few different ways that you all might get involved or learn more if you're interested. So I think some of this is touched on in the book, but just as a reminder, what is regenerative agriculture? It's really the philosophy by which the interconnected dynamic system of suppliers, consumers, technologists, farmers work together to restore soil health, ecosystem health, address inequity, and leave really our land, waters, and climate in better shape for our future generations. There has been a lot of investment lately in technology to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, create soil that is resilient in the face of a variety of climate events, preserve and utilize indigenous farming knowledge, nurture biodiversity of all kind, restore grassland, improve nutrition, and increase yield. So some of these may be familiar to you, and it's really multifaceted, as you can imagine. We're thinking about how to improve our environment, like restoring grassland, which 70% of that has been degraded in recent history because of climate impact, to thinking about the nutrition, the food that we eat, which some folks touched on earlier in the conversation. We are also thinking about bringing back or maintaining traditional knowledge that has been used for eons to support sustainable farming. So I wanted to highlight a couple of companies and founders that we have as a nonprofit provided grants to and supported in becoming sustainable businesses. The first one is my favorite to talk about. They're called Dairy Fit, and they're using machine learning to make more resilient cows. So what's the need here? The dairy cow in this day and age possesses pretty extraordinary capabilities in terms of milk production, but are actually not that good at adapting to difficulties or perturbations in their environment. So cows need to be more resilient to handle changes due to climate, and this is an issue that's dairy farmers face on a day-to-day basis. So our founder, who started Dairy Fit, she came from a dairy farming family, then was her first in her family to go to college and get her PhD in machine learning and computer and vision intelligence. So she has developed a computer vision algorithm to analyze the features of a cow's face and body to identify animals whose temperaments are the best suited to a farm's unique environment. And an analogy here is you might imagine a child or somebody who has Down syndrome, for example, has very particular facial features that can tell us a little bit about that person's health. Similarly, cows have very telling facial features, which I did not know, and I think a lot of people didn't know. To me, cows all look the same, but that's not the case. And so what happens is farmers are able to use this to proactively identify animals who have mechanisms to handle stress better. That way they can specifically breed those so that they can be more resilient against climate change, and also for those who might not be as resilient, proactively give preventative medicine and other wellness so that they can continue to meet the demand for milk, also have happier, healthier cows. There's less use of antibiotics and higher overall animal welfare. So again, a really interesting application of technology to support regenerative agriculture. The second is also female-founded Root Applied Sciences, who are making pesticide use more efficient. So right now, farmers normally take a prophylactic approach to pesticide use, and that means they spray everything on a pretty consistent schedule with the hope of capturing or killing pesticides. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. And because of various climate events, there are more and more crop threatening pathogens in the air, and they're becoming more unpredictable day by day. Something like 40% of crops are lost annually to pests, and disease, because farmers just don't know what the pathogens are, where they exist, when they are coming, when they're going to be impacting their crops. So Root Applied Sciences has created a fully automated and autonomous pathogen monitoring service. It's a device that continuously collects particles from the air near the crops and runs a DNA-based analysis, quantifying those pathogens that are present. Each sensor in the network there uploads these insights into the cloud and automatically notifies farmers of any risks to their crops. And so farmers are able to be a lot more targeted about how they treat their crops for the variety of pathogens that are present. So what's the potential for impact here? The idea is that farmers worldwide are going to be using fewer chemicals. This is a good thing. Less intense management, so it doesn't require constantly monitoring the crops. And of course, we have an impact on the quality of food. It's grown in a healthier way and in a way that's less resource intensive. The last company I want to highlight is Breckland. They're protecting crops from the growing threat of frost. So we're talking about climate events. One of the things that is increasing more and more is unseasonable frost. So cold weather that comes at random times of the year that's not expected, that destroys crops, and is quite devastating. So for example, there was an unexpected frost in 2017 across Europe, which resulted in nearly $4 billion of crop losses. So they can be quite widespread. As spring frost frequency is increasing across the world, growers really don't know how to be ready for this challenge. Currently, frost deterrent systems use a lot of CO2 and water, and so cost quite a bit and are resource intensive. So Breckland has combined precision application and sustainable material chemistry to develop an insulating coating to protect crops. They use a mobile sprayer and have created this special formula in order to insulate crops at a higher level of insulation. It's easier to operate the actual sprayer itself, and is costs less than current systems on the market. So, frost obviously impacts the growers or the farmers themselves, but then of course it has knock-on effects down the supply chain, right? So food processors, vendors, grocery stores, local economies, they all suffer in the wake of something unexpected like that. And so Breckland is really coming into the market with a much more flexible and low-cost system to help farmers with frost. So with that, I just wanted to share a couple of resources that listeners here might be interested in. One is Kiss the Ground. They're a nonprofit that I advised in the last couple of years. They're a nonprofit that promotes regenerative agriculture and really focus on three things: storytelling, education, and advocacy. I thought this audience might really find that interesting. There's a lot of mini documentaries and shorts on their website that allow you to see what's happening on the ground and hear people's voices directly from where they're working on these challenges. So I'd highly recommend that. And then, yeah, wanted to close it out with just one thing that I found really interesting from the book, and I think this is on their website as well, right? All We Can Save talks about the climate crisis is a leadership crisis. And the organization that I work with, Activate, is very much thinking about climate in that same way. We invest in these businesses that I just talked about, but we also spend a lot of time investing in these leaders so that we can have scientists making decisions in government, in politics, in the media, in NGOs, business, scientists who are incentivized not by maybe the traditional incentives of capitalism, but hopefully will promote innovation and promote data-based decisions. So I wanted to just encourage everybody to invest in yourselves, invest in others, think about that in the sense that, we could all be leaders in the climate effort one way or the other. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kavita. That was so much good information. And I had no idea that cows have unique facial features. So that's something definitely that was amusing that I learned. But any questions from anyone else? Any comments or questions? Heather, Monica, do you have anything to add? Okay. So we have one comment from Reed. She says, this was so interesting. I had to be driving, but loved the information that I didn't know before. So this is great. So thank you so much, Monica. Thank you so much, Heather and Kavita. Mansi's dropped off the call, but her input was amazing as well. So it was really good having all of you on this panel. So with that, I'll conclude. And whatever information that we get from Heather, we'll make sure we send it to everybody who was on this call. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.